Welcome, everyone, to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host, and we have a phenomenal guest and conversation today. Edyta, I'm going to let you introduce yourself in just a minute here, but I want to say a few things about your background. Right now, you're the CMO of Symfonia, right? You've been
That's right.
in the business world for a long time. You have worked with some of the biggest names in B2B and B2C, from Cisco all the way over to Procter and Gamble. And that has really helped formulate your go-to-market strategy and how you approach being a B2B CMO today. But what we're going to talk about is something that lots of CMOs worry about. I talk to CMOs all the time, and I would say that there is an imposter syndrome that a lot of them are worried about. And how do I earn my seat at the table? Because not only am I, as a CMO, responsible functionally for marketing in my company, but I am now a C-suite executive. I am in charge. I'm part of this team that's in charge of the long-term development and growth of the business overall. That is a big role to play these days. So I think that's where this kind of imposter syndrome comes from. But before we dig into this, I'd love to just turn it over to you for a minute here and explain a little bit more about your background.
Great, thank you. What an introduction. So let me try to explain a little bit more about myself. Indeed, I think I started my career with the FMCG sector. Before Procter & Gamble, I also worked for Guerlain, a lovely French brand, part of the LVMH corporation. And then I had a privilege to work for Procter & Gamble. And indeed, I would say Procter & Gamble, which at the time was considered, with L'Oreal and with Unilever, one of the top consumer brands. And in marketing circles, what I used to hear is that Procter trains you and gives you a proper curriculum as a marketeer. And when I joined, and actually I came from acquisition, I'm not going to go into the detail because we don't have time, and I was lucky to kind of get in as part of the brand they acquired. And one of the very, very first thing they did is that they were sending us on a strategy course in Geneva. I remember that. It was fun. And so we were formed properly. What is this marketing strategy? What are the key components? How to build it? What are the key elements of it? How to translate it into execution? And that stayed with me to this day. And then I decided to leave the world of FMCG and I got into Cisco, and that's how I stayed, and I'm still am in B2B tech. And that gave me a different experience, also good experience. But I think one of my commitments to B2B is to indeed carry that mantra of Procter & Gamble consumer marketing, that marketing is part of the business. It's not a tactic. It's a crucial element of the business. Brand manager in consumer run the brand as a business. And that's how I treat marketing. Marketing is not a worse cousin of sales. It's an equal partner to sales. And marketing needs to be commercial, needs to understand the business. So I carried that through working with Cisco. I carried that through working with SAP. And I think that's why I got the role of CMO actually at Symfonia, which is a much smaller brand. But hey, I own marketing end to end, and I converse directly about my budget with CFO or CEO. And I think what they appreciate about me is the fact that I look at marketing in its integrity, and it's a function that drives the business, not just the tactics.
I love that. And what I'd love to do is finish your introduction. I was too chicken to actually say your last name. If you could tell us your full name, I would appreciate that.
Sure. It's half Polish, half French. So originally I'm Polish, so Malesza, Edyta Malatrat, and Malatrat is French. My husband was French, and I keep this Frenchness very close to my heart. And what you also should know that I spent most of my career in UK. Because we decided to live there, so we decided to move to UK. So both Procter and Gamble and Cisco and SAP, these were the brands I worked for in UK. A few years ago, we decided to move to Poland. Again, that was a career move for me. And what I wanted to say as well is that languages and this sort of European side of me, something I feel very strongly about. I speak multiple languages. I educated my daughter to speak fluently 3 languages, and I am a fierce advocate for educating our children in those multi-languages, because children pick up everything so wonderfully. So if we can give them that, let's give them that.
I think it's a wonderful gift. I'm a father of 4 teenagers, and they speak one language. I think you could probably guess what it is. But here's what I want to do. I want to dig into our conversation today, right? Which is, why is marketing losing its seat at the table, right? Why are we not the part of the executive team that we want to be on a regular basis? And I would just love to just open it up and ask your opinion about why you felt passionate about this as a topic to talk about, and why is marketing losing its seat at the table?
And Steve, we talked a little bit about that and how to be strong. And at the same time, we know it's a little bit controversial. And of course, we have the answer. So stay with us, because towards the end of our conversation, we also discuss how to ensure you do retain on the board and are a very important voice. But and there are different probably things here throughout my career. This is what I have observed, and these are the things I was fighting with a little bit in my B2B career. First of all, I've seen a big difference moving from P&G to Cisco in terms of what marketing is responsible for. In the consumer world, the brand manager runs the brand like a business. He is responsible for entire P&L of that brand, profit and loss. He's also responsible for pricing. So I think it's, to some degree, it's a difficult role, but at the same time, if you run it well, then you talk business.
Yes.
In the marketing in B2B, it's a lot more narrower, and it is focusing mostly on that communication aspect. We
Yes.
don't own, at least in the companies and functions I worked for, we don't own the pricing. It's a different function. And I think we focused so much on the communication aspect. And I think in the last few years also on tactics. My favorite one is the whole debate about content, which we had a few years ago, and that drove me nuts.
Yep.
Because we shifting conversation from the strategy, from understanding the business, from the market to communication and tactics. And that is doing us disfavor as a function. And we will talk later how to shift that conversation. And look, it's a little bit obvious because a title like Chief Revenue Officer, 10 years ago, that job title wasn't existing on the books.
It wasn't.
But it started to appear. And I wonder, this is my own little Edyta's theory. I don't have the proof for that. But I wonder if the need for that role appeared in the business because marketing was focusing too much on the communication aspect and tactics. And it was quite difficult, and we're still struggling with this as a function, I think, to be properly analytical, and look at, for example, results in a very wide sense of our results, understanding investments, the ROI, and the short-term and longer-term results. So my own theory is the Chief Revenue Officer role that appeared quite recently was possibly put by businesses because marketing was narrowing its focus. But I don't have a proof for that. So here you go. I think too much focus on tactics, too much focus on just communication aspect, struggling with analytics, which can be such a strong advantage of marketing, I think, at at a function. And I think we're also struggling a little bit with this short-term and long-term impact of marketing, which could be also a whole debate on its own.
Well, I mean, so many things you said that were so important there. And what I want to do is like that chief revenue officer role, a lot of times that's really filled by somebody that's a chief sales officer, right? Their primary responsibility, they still have a
that's
quota
true.
over their head, right? The more enlightened companies have said, okay, how do we have somebody in charge of revenue? Like the whole go-to-market function, so sales and marketing and customer success is like key portions of that.
Yeah, yeah,
One thing that you said that I thought was really interesting that nobody has brought up before is that like the world of B2C, those brand managers run it as a business. Now,
yes,
CMOs, we've been told and we've read and we know we have to be very pipeline focused. Oh, we didn't used to be pipeline focused. We have to be very revenue focused. We have to be very data focused, right? So, but we also have to be very long-term focused, right? As well as short-term. Typically when you go to a board meeting these days, the meeting's going to open in some way with how are we doing this quarter against this quarter's quota? How are we doing against next?
yeah, yeah.
Right?
That's true.
That's the
That's
mentality, right? That's a very short-term focus. Yet we have very long-term focuses too. You brought that up at the very end of your last question. So
yes.
I want to play on that. How do you balance the short-term versus long-term, in what the responsibilities that we have and we should be having these days?
It's a very good question. And I think it's a challenge and at the same time an opportunity for us as CMOs and as marketing. Because especially in B2B, I think companies are very quarterly driven. And that's good. That we have to close the numbers. There is nothing wrong with that.
No.
Marketing has important role to help with the pipeline, bring leads. And actually, probably the smaller the customer we target, in terms of the SMB and then the micro, then actually the pipeline target for the marketing, the contribution from the marketing is higher because everything becomes digitally driven. So if it's, for example, really targeting micro businesses with e-commerce type of solutions, marketing practically can own the entire sales number. This is the direction, for example, we are seeing in Symfonia. So owning that is not a problem, and that's good. And that can give us, again, an important foot in the door to reclaim our seat.
Yes.
Together with all the analytics as well, how we drive these numbers, what is performing better and what is performing worse. At the same time, if you think about it, marketing plays a very important role in building a long-term brand longevity.
Yes.
And dare I say, in B2B setup companies, it's one of the very few functions who can think long-term and should think long-term, because sales teams think about closing the quarter.
Right.
So other than strategy function, who will think about the longevity of the brand? No one. So that is the marketing job. And I think understanding that, and honestly, I think and CFOs and CEOs, at least I'm lucky, my CEO completely, utterly gets that for the business to be healthy in 3 years' time, in 4 years' time, you need a strong, visible, recognizable brand. And I think that is the long term. It's difficult to prove how it works. But I think we're getting better at that. LinkedIn B2B is doing wonderful job in bringing a lot of research, data, and showing how investing in the brand can give this longer term impact on the business. So we're getting better at managing that short term and long term.
So, it's interesting. We're only as good as what we learn. And I learned something really incredible about a year ago on this podcast. This woman, she's a 3-time B2B CMO. And she said, Steve, here's the way I think about this. She said, today's brand is tomorrow's demand. And 95% of our audience isn't even in the market to buy right now.
Yes.
So what are we doing?
Yes.
What are we doing to introduce ourselves to that market? What are we doing to create top of mind with that market? What are we doing to make sure that we're seeing that market, that we're really, really interesting people in a company that thinks differently, that can really help them, right? And she said, if we do that right, then we actually take cycles away from the sales process, because then the salesperson doesn't have to establish the trust and the level that they would. They still need to, right? But we can do a significant portion of that job. And I ran that line, that simple line, which is sometimes something that's so simple, so powerful, by probably 15, 20 different CROs, and every single one of them nodded their head. Every single one of them had a quota over their head, but they completely agreed. Right. And I think so sometimes it's just even that alignment between us and sales, and what is the value of what we're really doing, and making sure that we're covering everything that we can, that we need to do for you. That's an important conversation to have internally as well.
Yes. Yes. And I think completely. And I think also the data, the analytics, and the fact that digital marketing helps us with a lot of KPIs, a lot of numbers. So the data is there to show us. I will give you one tiny example, and that is CEO to CEO organic, right? Hugely important tactic in the world of marketing, and a tactic that needs to be built with the time. You cannot just, I'm doing a quick trick and here you go, my ranking, I will be top of the page. No. CEO requires time and effort and day in, day out work to ensure you are visible on top of the page. And when your customers are putting search in the Google or other browser, you want to be one of the brands they search you for, right? That's the share of the search. It's one of the metrics we are looking after. And I can tell you, my CEO, Piotr, he loves that metric, and we're looking at that metric. And that metric is, to some degree, showing the visibility and strength of the brand. I also have the data points to show it took me 2 months to switch and improve the rankings in this channel. It wasn't something I could do, within weeks. So certain things takes time. And I think if you are using the right language and the right data points, you can explain to the business that building the brand requires time.
Absolutely. Because I think the story that you just told, the data that you just told, we need as CMOs to be better at that, because we come into these meetings and once the word brand is mentioned, like all of a sudden people are clocking out, right? They're like, okay, I've got this quota, right? Like I'm talking to CROs now, I'm like, I can't even talk, Steve. Right? Like we are all about closing out the year. Like I can't even think about anything else, right? That mentality, they're trained in that mentality, they're compensated in that mentality, right? So we just have to understand it's like they are our first internal audience, right? Our first audience is our own company, right?
It's the board completely. I will tell you that we have regular results review. Sales will have their own sales teams will have their own forecast meetings with the board. Marketing will have their own review pipeline, but also other results. So we really do make efforts to show the short term. There was no getting away from the fact that we will have to show performance of leads. So I'm not shy of showing the impact. Equally, I try to show other metrics, and that is the visibility of the brand, the performance of, of the brand in different channels, sometimes customer feedback. That is also what we are trying to show.
So let me ask you, you've talked a lot on here, and you started out with talking, very eloquently about like the training at Procter and Gamble, the complete and ultimate focus on the customer, and that drives, that understanding of the customer drives every aspect of what you do as a business owner of that unit, right? That brand manager. Tell me what you think is the role of understanding the customer in the B2B environment and how important that is, right? Like I'm going to put you on the spot. If I could say, having a deep, meaningful understanding of your customer that then drives your go-to-market strategy, how important is that? That deep understanding? One, not important at all. 10, it's actually vital to the overall growth and sustainability. 10. Okay.
So, Steve, it's a starting point. It's a starting point and the end. You cannot have a marketing strategy without definition of the target audience. And in B2B, that definition of the target audience is on multiple levels. And that is the definition of a company. What type of company? Is it a big one, like the thermographics? That's number one. Number two, it's within that company, which function? Is it one, two? Is it the whole, in bigger companies, you will have the entire suite that participate in a decision maker. We're selling a software, so we'll decide on a software. That will be a CFO, so financial, that will be CIO, the IT, that will be operations. The bigger the companies, the more function. So marketing needs to understand the functions, and then marketing needs to understand the persona of these people. So the job title and what are the needs. And I train my team. In fact, I always, my marketing strategy is very simple. There are three elements in it. Is the who, it's the what, your value proposition, your positioning, and it's the how. And that framework, by the way, is what P&G taught me. Very simple. And if you construct your strategy along these elements, you are likely to have the majority of your, okay, you can add a little bit why and, blah, blah, blah. Some other, the how will be very extended because it's the route to market and it's, different tactics, etc. But the customer is the starting point. You cannot go anywhere with your message, with your value proposition, if you don't understand the customer.
So this isn't a trick question, but I have a proposition I want to run by you, which is, I think I've worked with and now talked to, we've interviewed, I think this is going to be like episode 143 at all B2B C-suite executives. And I've asked this question to a number of them. After working with and asking this question, but it was a B2B fractional CMO for years. I'm a B2B SaaS founder. I was a B2B CMO. My point of view is that most B2B companies have a very, very deep familiarity with their ICP, their ideal customer profile. They don't have a deep understanding. And a big part of that is because we think going through the motions of being a B2B business give us access to and an understanding of the customer. In other words, we have sales conversations with prospects all the time. We have customer success conversations all the time. We may have a contact center, customer support, right? Well, just for an example, in sales conversations, Gong, looked at thousands and thousands and found out that the sales rep actually talks 2/3 to 3/4 of the time. Mm-hmm. And then when the prospect actually talks, they're reflecting on what the rep was talking about. If you were going to design like a P&G style of how do I understand deeply my customer so that I can create better experiences and differentiate myself better in the marketplace, you wouldn't say, I'm going to do it through a sales conversation, right? You wouldn't do it through a customer success conversation where we're putting out fires and answering questions and trying to cross sell and upsell. Those are not good, deep, meaningful conversations. So that leaves us with how do we? How do we truly understand our customers in the P&G type of model that we really need that deep understanding?
Oh boy, now you have to stop me if I talk too much, Steve. What P&G what was great about, and I think in B2B world, we are lacking that a little bit, and I will explain in a minute why. But in consumer world, really the understanding of the customer is on one hand very analytical. You look at the data, you measure everything, you prepare communication, you have to test it on a panel before you go live. You look at the results, you work with retailers, big retailers, in UK, Tesco, Boots, to understand how your brand is selling. So the understanding of trends, behaviors on the analytical level is huge. That's one thing. On the other hand, what is fabulous is this qualitative side. And that is where you get really proper insights and the proper why someone wants to buy your brand or doesn't, as a matter of fact, right? And what P&G, and I suspect it's similar in other big brands, is what I mentioned at the beginning. We had to follow our customers. I remember things like we had to follow our customers when they do their shopping. So you follow them literally. Of course, they know that you are with them.
Right.
And you follow them. Oh, why did you pick up this brand on the shelf and not this one? So we had to do this type of things. We participated in a lot of consumer panels or research where we were discussing different topics. And if you bring it to the B2B world, what is happening is that marketing has got a lot less contact, real-time, qualitative with a customer. Because who's got that contact? It's sales. Right. Sales is on the phone, sales is selling, and suddenly we still have got a quantitative aspect and we look at the data and we analyze, but we are missing the qualitative conversation with a customer. And I think I have an answer here. I have an answer. How we do that. For me, one of the important platforms to exchange with customers are events. I love participate in live events and talking with customers in the events, whether it was in SAP or now. Or another way to do that is producing the case studies. Yes. One of the greatest armors of B2B marketing is customer advocacy. Another customer will buy if they know that somebody else, a peer, is happy with the product. So we are also very keen in Symfonia to produce, and it's marketing. Marketing is producing the case studies. Marketing is looking after the testimonials. And I think that is the way to engage with customers in this, let's call it qualitative way, and dig into those questions like why you love our brand, and why you bought us, why would you recommend us to another company. So that would be my answer.
So I love the learning. I guarantee you, my biggest takeaway from our conversation here is that the world's best marketers come out of the P&Gs of the world, right? This is like they had in the lesson that they train, they indoctrinate, that you have now taken into SAP and Oracle in your entire B2B career, is that we have to have that qualitative. We have to spend time with them, right? And I have talked to CMOs, and the playbook is this. I come on as a CMO, and I start dialing customers, and I'll talk to 15, 20 different customers. But here's what happens to every single one of them. It stops, right? Understanding the customer is not a finite project, right? Our ICP, our customers are complex and always changing. That's a given, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
The key is, how do you continue to have these one-on-one dialogues, right? Spending time with the customer. That's, I think, an enlightened CMO that has a seat at the table has the voice of the customer that they represent, because that is the highest voice of authority in the business.
completely. And I would add maybe one more point, which I think in my current job I'm pursuing, I'm exploring, and it works. I think marketing and CMO can also be that connector in the company to connect different
Absolutely.
teams and the connection points with the customer. And I will give you another example what I mean. One of the things we now started to do is that we work a lot closer with our customer support, which is another team, nothing to do with marketing, customer support, which, you know, when the customer has got probably a challenge with the product, or a customer would like to know how to leverage better the products they bought, they call in customer service. So listen, one of the things we are exploring, and you know, here we go, I give it away to a competition, is engage with your customer support to learn what the customers are calling about, what are the challenges, what are the problems,
Absolutely.
how,
Absolutely.
you know, if they bought a technology and they don't understand completely how to use it, let's understand which functionalities are they, so we can bring it as a food for the content, for the blog. So
Yes.
one of my latest
Yes.
things that I connected my a content manager with our support, customer support manager, so they can exchange the data and we can connect the dots. So I think
Yeah.
marketing can connect, you know, that central part is a customer and what they do, but because the customer has got entry point to different parts of the organization, marketing can play that role to connect the different data points and the knowledge, the expertise that different teams bring about the customer.
I wish we had 2 more hours, because I think we could go for at least another couple of hours. But
Good.
I
We
have
could.
one last question, and a very short answer on this, because the question is, we've talked about so much here, right? About earning that seat at the table as a CMO. If there was one takeaway that you wanted the audience here of C-suite executives to take away from this conversation, if there was one thing, what would that be?
I will give you 3 for the price of 1, Steve. So how do you secure your seat at the table? Show your board that you understand the market. Bring them the knowledge that they need to understand the market the company is in, whether it's the customer, whether it's the technology your customer is, the market. That is a knowledge your CEO needs to shape the strategy, the long-term strategy of the business. And if you bring that knowledge, they will love you. So first is the market, and in that market is the customer. We talked along about the customer. Then is the business. Make sure you understand the business. What are the key business metrics, the key business KPIs? Usually in SaaS model, there are even something like 10, 15. Make sure you understand them. You understand the Edyta of this world, the ARR, you know, all those terms. Marketing needs to understand it, and marketing then needs to translate it into marketing strategy. So market and the customer, business, and then you set your marketing strategy and use the analytics to show the results and show the insights. The board will love you for that.
Well, here's what I'm going to predict. There's going to be a lot of people that have questions. Would it be appropriate if we gave out a link to your LinkedIn profile, so that people had questions to ask you, that they could reach you?
Absolutely. I hope I would be able to scale. So let's hope there are not millions of questions, but absolutely, we can do that. I'm more than happy to answer, to help.
Fantastic. Well, Edyta, thank you so much for coming in and sharing just a wealth of information and knowledge and your unique point of view of how do we earn that seat at the table and keep it, right? So thank you for coming on. I appreciate all your time.
My pleasure. And thank you for the invitation, Steve.